While going through the program, I was challenged and I learned a lot of things that I hadn't known in the past. It wasn't really until I went for my first interview that I realized that I needed to be putting the stuff I learned into the interview. And once I did that, they called me back for a second interview. I impressed them and I got hired. And I can confidently say that without what I learned at Springfield College, I wouldn't have got that job.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us. Welcome to a discussion on the future of industry and jobs in Boston, who's hiring and how. I'm Tim Logan, I'm a business reporter at the Boston Globe, and I'll be moderating this discussion for the next hour or so. We'll be looking at the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on Greater Boston's economy and its job market, what's changing and what isn't, and where things go from here, and how companies, job seekers, and the people who love them might navigate these interesting times. Our event this morning is being presented by Springfield College. So first, I'd like to throw it over to Shannon Fields from Springfield for some opening remarks.
Hi, everyone. I hope you are all doing well. My name is Shannon Fields, and I'm here as a representative of Springfield College, the sponsor of today's event, Who's Hiring and How, the Future of Boston Industries. I currently work for and am a graduate student at Springfield College. As a student, I've had a great opportunity to experience the humanics philosophy offered of educating students in spirit, mind, and body for leadership in service to others. Long before the pandemic changed how people were educated, the school expanded its ability to offer programming in hybrid and fully online formats, which has been beneficial to working adults like me. Springfield College has also been creating partnerships with local, national, and global organizations to offer $5,000 or $10,000 educational grant opportunities for their employees. As you learn more about the labor market from leading experts, I hope at the end of the event you can visit springfield.edu/globe for more information. Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon. Now let me introduce our panel. Like I said, my name is Tim Logan. I write about real estate, development, and urban issues on the Globe's business desk. We've been exploring the economic impacts of the pandemic pretty much since it began in March. There are many impacts. We've seen Greater Boston's economy shed about 500,000 jobs and then grow about half of them back. Some industries, like restaurants, hotels, and tourism, have been devastated. Others basically kept on ticking, and some, like life sciences, just keep growing. We've seen a revolution in remote work and an emptying out of places like the office towers of downtown Boston. We've also seen a raging debate, still going on, and probably will be going on for months, for how many of these changes are temporary and how many of them will last a lot longer than this pandemic. I'm joined today by three people who've had front row seats to all of this, each from a slightly different angle. I'm going to give each of them a moment to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into some questions. Lauren Jones is the Massachusetts State Director of Apprenti, which is a program designed to expand and diversify tech industry talent in Massachusetts. Before that, she was the Director of Partner Programs at HubWeek, and prior to that worked in the City of Boston's Department of Economic Development. Lauren, you want to say hi?
Hi, and good morning. Thank you, Tim, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel. As Tim mentioned, I am the Massachusetts State Director for Apprenti. Apprenti is a nonprofit that's actually nationally based, but with a great presence here in Massachusetts. We engage with employers to help bridge the tech talent and diversity gap, really helping to pave a path for people who may not have technical skills, enter a career in tech, and at the same time helping companies really invest in their future talent and grow that pipeline, understanding there's such a need and a demand for tech jobs across industries.
Great. We've also got Jay Ash here. Jay is President and CEO of the Massachusetts Competitive Partnership. It's one of the state's leading business groups. Before that, he served as Economic Development Secretary for Governor Charlie Baker, and before that as City Manager in Chelsea. Hi, Jay.
Hey, Tim, it's great to be with you. Great to be with everybody else. I should get out of the way to show the MACP. There it is. There's the logo. MACP is a membership organization. We have 15 of the largest businesses in Massachusetts who come together to promote their collective work around the economy. And what's different about our organization than other trade associations is that the CEOs themselves participate in our organization. So when we have a board meeting, I have the CEOs of places like State Street Bank and Fidelity and Bank of America, Suffolk, Wayfair at the table. That gives us a unique insight into the real movers and shakers in the economy. And around today's topic, hiring, have some tremendous insight about what big business is thinking about and hoping to help small businesses do.
Great, thanks. And we've also got Liz Bertholet. Liz is the research director at real estate firm Newmark Knight Frank, which is one of the largest real estate brokerages in Boston. She's held similar positions at other Boston area real estate firms over the years, and is personally one of my sort of go-to experts for how companies think about talent and their real estate needs and where they want to locate within the region. Liz?
Thanks, Tim. Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here today. As Tim said, I am research director for Newmark's Boston office. We are a full service brokerage firm. We, do leasing, sales, property management, valuation, debt financing, you name it. I help service the brokers and their clients, bringing them timely data, tracking the market, writing reports, updating proprietary databases, and just keeping, my finger on the pulse of everything that's happening in the region.
Great. Well, thank you guys for joining us this morning. Let's get into some questions. I would say to the audience along the way, we'll have the way this will work is we'll talk. We'll do some questions and answers for a few minutes, and then we have some questions that were pre-submitted by audience members who are joining us this morning. But we also have some time at the end for sort of live questions. If you hear things that you want to find out more about or questions you guys have personally, please. We have a Q&A box as part of the Zoom here, and just please enter them in, and we'll take some of those towards the end. But first off, I guess there's been a lot of tumult over the last 6 or 8 months in the economy. Where do you guys see this going, and particularly what industries within Greater Boston do you see growing and perhaps shrinking as we eventually come out of this episode next year?
I'll take that one, Tim, to start. I mean, I can kind of comment on where we are currently. And over the last 8 to 10 months, I would say the office using sectors have fared better. Given that these jobs are more amenable to work from home scenarios, we have seen fewer job losses in those office related industries, which is sort of a deviation from previous business cycles. Just the nature of this health crisis has been more impactful for the service industries, retail, hospitality, restaurants, all of those sectors that rely on people to be out and about, moving, spending money, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I would jump in and say everything that Liz said is accurate, and big businesses are doing okay. Some are doing really well. Most are holding their own. They do recognize the impact that they've had on some of the industries that are having difficulties. My office is on Boylston Street in Boston, and I look around and I see lots of retail shops that are closed, lots of restaurants that I used to go to that aren't open, and there's a recognition that when it comes to hospitality, when it comes to business travel, when it comes to catering, the things that businesses would rely upon as ancillary services, there's been an impact. So we see some opportunities for post-COVID recovery in those areas, but I think they're going to be slower. The bigger companies are going to be hiring at faster clips and are already poised to take advantage of the recovery.
And I think to add to the big businesses or the offices that Liz spoke to, I think across the board, technological transformations have really accelerated. So where companies may not have had to fully adapt to some tech times, the last several months have really accelerated how they've integrated their IT needs. And I think that also translates to some hiring within IT tech related jobs as well.
So we have some industries that are rising and growing, right, and that we think will grow in 2021. We also have some industries that have already suffered a lot and may not go back as fast, right? So how do we, if I'm somebody who, say I worked in the restaurant industry or in tourism or in some sector of the economy that has been pretty hard hit, and I'm thinking, gosh, maybe I want to figure out a career in tech, or maybe I want to get into healthcare. There are programs that exist to help people, right? How do we connect? How do people connect with those programs, and sort of how would you recommend sort of thinking about career transitions at a time like this?
I'll take that to begin. I think this is a really great time for people to kind of rethink their paths and really pivot where there's great transformational skills or transitional skills as well, where someone may have worked in restaurant retail and can now apply those skills in a range of industries that are needing more talent. The state has a great network of career centers through MassHire Career Centers in Boston, but also in municipalities across the state. And that's a great place for unemployed individuals looking for work, as well as underemployed. So you may have a job or two and you're looking now to upskill and create a more stable career path in an industry or a company that may be hiring. And that's a great way to start to really connect to not only the jobs, but also the resources, the programs that may be able to quickly and accelerate your training, like Apprenti, but also all the different boot camps and training providers that make up the ecosystem here in Massachusetts.
Yeah, Lauren, I want to build on that. I spent some time in the governor's workforce cabinet, and as you know, spent time with the Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development and the Secretary of Education, and we were very high on MassHire. And MassHire is really a one-stop. So if you're watching this today and you're thinking about finding your next job, whether you have one or not, MassHire is a great first place to go, and MassHire can connect you to career exploration, can connect you to training programs, can connect you to actual job openings that exist. So it's a tremendous place to look. Tim, as you noted in your opening, we've lost a lot of jobs, and unfortunately, through this pandemic, those jobs lost, a lot of them may not come back. But there are opportunities that are abounding for other types of jobs. And, maybe I'll touch upon them a couple, Tim, unless you were planning on asking specifically. But, anything that has to do with digital is going to be in demand. So all the way from fixing whatever digital device I have on my home desk, all the way to digital marketing and developing the next software for whatever the innovation is going to take us. So, Lauren, if I can compliment Apprenti for a minute, Apprenti is a great program that helps people find their way through digital training and into jobs and companies that are looking to hire. So lots of opportunities in anything that is digital, but there's jobs in logistics. There's jobs in from transportation to supply. There's jobs in manufacturing. Some manufacturers haven't been in favor during the pandemic, but others have, and especially in the life sciences world. We hear Moderna coming up with a vaccine. They'll be manufacturing that vaccine and looking for manufacturing help. So there are opportunities out there. It means that people should look at their skill set, and as we should all do, continually work on improving our skill sets and better position ourselves with employers for employment.
One of the things that we've learned in this, I think a lot of us have learned in this pandemic, is that we can work from home, right? And that we don't necessarily have to go to a physical, it depends a lot on the industry, obviously, but for a lot of people, there's this sort of been a revolution in where we work. And I think I'm wondering, and I think there's a growing conversation about how, if I live in Boston, do I have to find a job that's physically located in Boston? And for that matter, if I'm a company in Boston, do I have to hire workers who live in Boston and pay them Boston wages, right? Where do you guys see the whole work from home revolution going in the wake of this? Are we gonna, how far back is the pendulum gonna swing from all of us doing this Zoom stuff all day?
So, Tim, I think everyone has heard or seen or read about the announcements from Facebook or Twitter or whatever, tech company is out there and kind of said, hey, our people can work from home indefinitely. We have all these new programs. We don't need to be in the office, et cetera. I would say that it'll end up somewhere in the middle. That's sort of my opinion. We'll end up more of a hybrid. The companies that will actually have indefinite 100% work from home situations, I think will be few and far between. I mean, kind of what we're seeing with some of the tenants in Boston specifically, there are some smaller tech tenants that are kind of saying, hey, we're going to keep our people home for the next 6 to 8 months. Then we'll be back out in the market looking for office space again. So I think some of these issues are a little bit more temporary. And we haven't seen a ton of movement outside of Boston. We talk about millennials moving to the suburbs. Some of that is happening, but they still need to be connected to the city if they're required to be in the office a certain number of days per year. And I think Facebook is a good case study. If you look post-COVID, they ended up leasing a fairly substantial office in New York City, even after they announced that they were going to allow all, whoever wanted to work from home. So it's just pointing to the fact that they still need a home base. They still need office space for all that collaborative, innovative work. So my opinion is we sort of end up somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I think I would agree with your general direction, Liz. I was reading recently a McKinsey report that indicated that 60% of workers in the United States economy cannot work remotely. So let's keep in mind that while work from home is the buzz, 60% of people who are working don't have that option. And so there's still going to be reasons to travel into a work site, and those work sites are going to need to be somewhere. But talking about work from home, Tim, to your question, it feels like it's here to stay. Not in the way that we see it now. We did a recent study at MACP and indicated that something like 98% of office employees were still working from home. We don't think that that's going to be a 5-day-a-week situation. Employers are seeing that they can be productive, and in some cases even more productive by allowing their employees to work from home. But the fundamentals of the workplace and a strong economy has people coming together and the convergence of ideas, getting to know each other, being able to develop relationships, be able to develop trust that happens on more of a one-on-one setting and, of course, around a water cooler as opposed to on Zoom means that companies are going to want to see people come into the office at some point. Individual companies will have different policies. Some will require you to come to work all 5 days a week, but some will say 4 or 3. And understand that 4 or 3 still works for them and makes it as almost a benefit to employees that they don't have to worry about rush hour. They don't have to worry about getting dressed up as much as they do. I have my jacket on today, Tim, but I'm also wearing jeans on the bottom side. So, there are benefits like that to employees that I think employees are going to want. And as a result, businesses who want to attract employees are going to have to offer. So I think it'll be a mix of a lot of different work styles.
I'm not wearing shoes, Jay, right now. So yeah, no, and there's a lot there, right? Where that flexibility people like, I hear the same thing in talking to real estate people and companies, right? That like, we don't necessarily, the notion that everybody has to be sitting in front of their computer all day, every day in an office with everybody is maybe we don't need to do that anymore, right? But the notion that we can all move to Vermont or North Carolina or wherever and continue to work here doesn't really seem like that's where this is largely going either. What about within the region, right? There has been a incredible concentration of jobs in the core of Boston, downtown Boston, the Seaport, Back Bay, and around the universities in recent years. And I'm wondering if in this idea of more flexibility and also a sort of a sense that at least some people are moving to the suburbs, some of which was happening before the pandemic, but accelerating now. Like, are we going to see more companies looking out on 128 or 495 or sort of suburban job centers, as opposed to this piling into the core that we had been seeing and that really had powered a lot of growth in central Boston in recent years? Is that do you think we'll see more jobs in suburban areas in the next couple of years?
So, I mean,
I think
for
the
office
Liz,
jobs,
go ahead.
yeah. So for office jobs and tech jobs, those that are amenable to work from home, and even finance and legal, everyone is really talking about it, hub and spoke, doing the testing, see if it works for them. There's a lot of buzz surrounding this concept, but we haven't seen any real material decisions made by companies that are saying, hey, we need a suburban location, we're going to split our offices, or hey, we're just going to decamp downtown and go to the suburbs. We haven't seen that yet. But everyone is thinking about it. And one interesting thing that I did learn from some of my colleagues on a call yesterday, that there are some pretty big office users, pretty big employers in the city that are saying, hey, we are not going to make a decision about our real estate until, well after there's a vaccine, well after there's some clarity in what's going on, because deciding right now, this is unprecedented times, not to, use that word over and over again, but there are a lot of companies that are just saying, we want to wait and see what actually transpires, and then we'll make our decision. But I will say a lot of companies are thinking about hub and spoke. We just aren't really seeing it in a material way yet.
Yeah, and I again, Liz, it sounds like you and I should just write a book together because we come up with the same lines. But yeah, there you go. You can do the writing, I'll do the pictures. So what I'm hearing from our biggest employers are that they still value offices, and they still value the hub that is Boston. The fundamentals that made Boston a strong economy still exist and are likely to exist post-COVID. So companies were flocking to Boston because they were attracted by talent, and the talent was here because young people would rather be in cities than being in suburbs. It's great to get out to the suburbs when you want to get away from COVID, but once COVID has disappeared, people are going to want to come back together again. They're going to want to recreate together. They're going to want to socialize together. They're going to want to enjoy each other's company and learn from each other and share experiences together. And so I expect that after the vaccine, that young people will start coming back to Boston. And when young people start coming back to Boston, the companies that need that young talent to fuel their growth, especially in innovation, young people bring lots of energy, but they also bring a new way to do an old thing. Those companies are going to be here as well. So do I think that some companies are going to take more of a position in suburban locations and allow for remote work? Yes. But I really do believe that the fundamentals of what has made Boston strong, the ability for companies to get the talent and converge on ideas to create new opportunities for business are going to dominate the day, and that Boston will be, and places like Boston will be strong places for the economy going into the future.
Maybe this is a bit of a chicken and an egg question, but how does that affect the job market here, right? So much of our economy is based on innovation and collisions, right? And people bumping into each other at industry events, at coffee shops, walking down the street, right? And that's also how a lot of people look for work and find work and grow their careers. If we're a little less concentrated than we were, does that become a harder network for people to navigate, I guess? And is that how do you make of that trade-off?
Tim, there's an argument to be made that the reason why remote work has worked for companies is because everybody already had existing relationships prior to the pandemic. And so it was easy to go off into our different directions, but we knew who to talk to and we knew how to talk to those people. I had one of my CEOs recently say to me, the Zoom thing is working for me. When I turn on Zoom, the meeting I am having is very productive. What I'm missing is the first 10 minutes before the meeting and the 10 minutes after the meeting, when that casual conversation can lead to an, oh, by the way, or have you looked at this, or let's get together and talk about that. And that's going to be tough to replicate from distant areas. So what I've been hearing is that employers are willing to allow for their employees to live almost anywhere as long as they can get back to the office. For some people, that may mean an occasional plane ride. Maybe I'll live in Montana or New Jersey or Florida, and I'll come in once a month by plane to just check in. But for most people, it's going to mean that they need to be within a drive of the office. And they may not need to come into the office all 5 days, but they may need to come in 3 days a week. And the reason to bring them in is to make sure that they're all getting to know each other. They're all thinking about issues and talking about those issues in a different way. And they're building trust. That trust will allow them to then do some spectacular things for their company and for their economy.
I think when you consider the job seeker outside of Boston and the hub that we have here in Boston, it really expands opportunities for job seekers that may be in Worcester, in Lowell or Merrimack Valley, on the South Coast, whether they're looking for jobs in those regions or coming into Boston, because we know there's still jobs in those regions as well. And so I think if anything, while we're in these remote times now and individuals are looking for opportunity, there's greater access to be able to tap into companies that may be hiring for a remote period right now, and then eventually looking for them to come in, whether it is 5 days a week or maybe once a week, as we've been alluding to. So it gives a little bit more flexibility as they hopefully can find the jobs, maybe a little bit longer travel within the state, but then at some point consider what that will look like on the other side as we all navigate in these new norms.
You can get your foot in the door without having to worry about a commute from Springfield to Boston, say. And
for now, at least, yeah.
right. And then they know that you can do the job, and it's easier, right? Than to say, in the future. Yeah. Great. Well, we got a lot of questions.
Imagine, Tim, if I could I just jump in for 1 second on that concept, though? Imagine you and I work for Company A. You're going into work 3 or 4 or 5 times a week, and I'm working remotely more often than not. You're getting to see the boss around the water cooler a little bit more. You're hearing things in the office, and you're able to take advantage of what's happening in the office. And I'm not. Right. And it comes time for promotion. It comes time for an opportunity to grow. The familiarity that you've developed with the boss and the people in the office may give you a better shot. I may be forced to come into the office just because I need to keep up with Tim, and I need to put my face in front of my boss every now and then. So I think there are opportunities. I think those are going to present challenges to people who are going to work remotely fully. And over time, as COVID gets further into the rearview mirror, I expect that we're actually going to see more people come to the office, not 5 days a week, but I expect that more people are going to find their way into the office to be able to do all those other things outside of the actual work in order to be successful in the office.
I was talking with an executive at a company recently who was telling me that that's more or less how it went at his place. They started back in, and at first it was like 5%, maybe 10% of people were coming into the office, and it was fine, right? Because if we're all remote, we're all remote. But if once people start coming in, then it's like, oh gosh, what am I missing? This is kind of a relationship business. So like being FaceTime ratters, and then gradually more and more people started realizing that by not being physically present, they were missing out on intelligence, on opportunities. And they eventually got so many people in that they hit the city cap and they couldn't have any more people in. But, I think I agree that fear of missing opportunities is real. I know I have school age kids, and I know a lot of my coworkers do too. And a lot of people I talk with do, and they're sort of worried about that as schools are still home for the rest of this year, right? How do you navigate? That's a whole other complex conversation that we probably don't want to get into, but sort of how do you navigate that balance of, a working parent's going to get set back in all of this too. But that's a whole, like I said, that's a whole other complex issue. There's a lot to navigate here on a personal advancement level, it feels like, for people. We got a lot of really good questions from the audience. I'm looking at the box. We've already got 11, so please keep asking them. We'll have some time for live questions at the end, but I wanted to get to a few of the sort of pre-submitted questions that people sent in advance. We got several along these lines, right? So before the pandemic, we've seen this explosion of the gig economy, the sharing economy, and a sort of rise in freelance and contract work, which offers flexibility both to workers and employers, but also doesn't always include benefits, for instance, or stability. Several people are sort of wondering, are we going to see, coming out of the pandemic and into this recovery, are you going to see even more freelance work, as companies might be hesitant to hire people back sort of full-time with benefits, or are people, or is it going to be a competitive enough labor market basically that companies are going to have to offer full-time jobs to people? What do you guys think?
So I can talk about the data side of it, but I really want to hear what Jay and Lauren are hearing sort of on the ground in our market. At a very macro level, we're seeing consistent hiring in temporary workers. At a national level for October, of the 200,000 or so professional and business services jobs that we gained, about half of those were temporary workers. And I think that has to do with, uncertainty in the market. Businesses don't know where we're headed. They don't, they can't plan beyond the next couple of months. So it makes sense to kind of have these temporary workers as a stopgap. But that, I think, is more related to the current situation. But that's, what we're seeing at a national level for hiring for temporary workers.
And so go ahead, Lauren.
No, I was going to say, I think from the seat that I'm in, I see companies have been and continue to reimagine how they find their talent. And I think while we've been experiencing COVID over the last several months, it's been compounded by a racial justice and social justice movement where companies are grappling with not only hiring freezes or what their workforce looks like today, but also literally what their workforce looks like today and in the future. And so I think as they think about how they're finding their talent, they're also then thinking a number of different ways of how to bring in that new and hopefully more diverse and inclusive workforce. And so I feel like from the seat that I'm in, I have the opportunity to hear from employers that are trying to think about still an opportunity to bring in more diverse talent that has access to benefits and resources and our regular employees, but knowing that they may have to do so over the long term, not necessarily what it will look like filling a job tomorrow, but really looking ahead, knowing that there's still some answers that are unknown and the timeline for COVID is continuing to evolve, but knowing that at the end of the day, they're still going to have jobs open and they're going to need to fill them. And they want to be able to tap a broader network of job seekers.
Yeah, and I would add that the good news, if you want to look at the cup as half full, is that large employers are saying that they are going to be hiring. There's an expectation that as we come out of the pandemic, that there's pent-up demand and the economy will take off. Let's hope that it's a good economy for everybody. But what I'm also hearing is that similar to the question about physical space, coming out of such an uncertain time, you don't want to make long-term fixed commitments, and that would include on a workforce. So we were already going in the direction of more gig workers in the economy, and my expectation is that at least in the short term, there's going to be a lot more work for gig workers, which isn't a bad thing because it allows you to get in your door maybe into one or two or three different employers and see what you like, what you don't like, and make some long-term decisions, and it gives employers an opportunity to look at that as well. The McKinsey report that I referenced said that I think it was 7 out of 10 executives believe that they're going to be contracting for more contractors and temporary workers over the next couple of years. So to the extent that you have marketable skills and can't figure out the full-time opportunity, those marketable skills can come to play in the gig economy, allowing you to try out a couple of different places and see where the right fit is. And then as the economy settles back down again and we get more into a state of normalcy, an opportunity to pick where the right job and the right company is for you.
We also got a few questions about the outlooks for specific industries and how they'll grow or not grow over the next few years. And one that really jumped out at me and that I've been personally as a reporter here trying to wrestle with is higher ed. It's always been such a big and stable base of our economy and a huge employer, particularly of sort of middle class and really all over the spectrum people. And a lot of good jobs with good benefits. And it's, as an industry, it's under immense pressure right now, both right now with the questions about in-person schooling and sort of long-term demographic trends that we're challenging some of our colleges even before all this. Where do you guys see that the higher ed sector going, and then sort of thinking through like what are the ramifications of that for the economy and job market in Greater Boston?
Yeah, eds and meds has always been the foundation upon which we built a strong economy, and has been a backstop when we were sliding backwards. In this recession, the eds and meds have felt it as hard, if not harder, than the general economy. So this has been an unusual situation. I keep on talking about the fundamentals, and Boston's been blessed to have great educational institutions and great medical institutions. And when we get back to some semblance of normalcy, quality prevails. And my expectation is that for those students who are looking for an on-campus experience, Boston, Cambridge, Greater Boston, even my college town of Worcester has a lot to offer. But we need to recognize that innovation in education is taking place. And so the smartest of colleges and universities are figuring out how to do both. And I think we'll see more of that. And so, again, opportunities for people to contribute to that. On the medicine side, there's no doubt that telehealth has been one of the beneficiaries, if I could say it that way, of the pandemic. We've certainly benefited from telehealth as customers, as clients, as patients. But the fact of the matter is that telehealth has made substantial advances through this short period of time, and that's going to have ramifications on the big hospitals who need to manage it, but especially on the smaller hospitals. So I think if there are any policy makers on our call here today, it's important for us to not take for granted eds and meds and think that they're always going to bounce back. We need to tend to the field that's been a cash crop of eds and meds, and make sure that we're adopting policies and helping those industries while we look at every industry and what their particular needs may be.
And I think just to add on to what Jay has already said, I think what we're seeing is an acceleration of change that was already occurring in these industries. We already had telehealth. Now it's much more widely accepted. A lot of the smaller universities in our region were already facing fiscal pressures and lower student populations. We were already seeing consolidation in both meds and eds. So similar to demographic shifts, I think this is just COVID has caused an acceleration of these changes and of these transformations in these industries.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Another question, there was several questions we got from watchers and people ahead of time, was about specific parts of areas within Massachusetts and how they might see more job growth outside of Boston, Worcester, Springfield, Lowell, South Coast. You touched on a few of these, but do you guys see more opportunities coming out of this for, those gateway cities, smaller cities that might offer a little bit more manageable quality of life than the core of Boston, and lower costs for that matter for companies that are looking for places to grow? Do you think we'll see more growth in those sort of, for that matter, you could expand that to Providence. I know we're talking about Massachusetts here, but you could expand that to Providence or something or Portland, Maine. Do you see more opportunities in those sort of places, in those sort of markets?
Yeah, Liz, I'm interested in hearing what you see on the commercial and industrial real estate side. If you look at the residential side,
yeah,
you can't touch a house in Worcester right now or in the Berkshires. If you can find it, the asking prices are being exceeded by the people who end up signing the contract to acquire them. So people are telling us that they believe that they can work from Worcester, that they can work from Lowell, that they can work from New Bedford, that they can work from Pittsfield and North Adams and Great Barrington. The keys to that are really going to be the infrastructure that supports that work. The 5G coming in, the ability to connect and have reliable connections are going to be important. The ability for ancillary services, to talk about growths and in the job front. If you're an IT support person and you have an entrepreneurial spirit, boy, what a great time to establish your own company and be able to service clients who are working from home but are far enough away from the office that the IT office guy just can't come and fix something. So, yeah, I think there are going to be opportunities for those communities from the residential side. Liz, interested in what you feel from the commercial and industrial side.
Yeah, I mean, as someone from the Worcester area, I really hope that, the city has its renaissance. But, looking at sort of the industries that are growing in the suburbs and sort of these outer suburbs and even Worcester, it's biomanufacturing. So we're seeing a lot of demand for this specialty use operation, some of it related to COVID, some of it's going to be vaccine production, but a lot of it is being within the region near Cambridge, within an hour's drive of Cambridge, but needing either more space or, cheaper real estate. So we're seeing a lot of biomanufacturing in Norwood and Plainville and Framingham, and Worcester has garnered some attention in their healthcare and life science industry. But the industrial market, I will say, this is the strongest market we have ever seen in Greater Boston, probably in 20 or 30 years, or maybe ever. We're seeing massive amount of demand, e-commerce, logistics, retailers. All of that has just been exacerbated by COVID, and you just continue to see so much demand. And we're seeing a lot of that, pushing outside of the metro area boundaries into places like Uxbridge or Charlton or Carver, because that's where you can really build the big distribution centers. I think there's opportunities there for jobs. We don't have robots in all of these warehouses just yet. So that's definitely a driver for commercial real estate and the economy.
And I think as you think about creating more jobs outside of Boston, where there's the infrastructure, like Jay referred to, even in transportation services, I think that's something that you think about, so that the job seekers that are out in these gateway cities or other parts of the Commonwealth, making sure that there is an ease of getting to work and from point A to point B, as more job opportunities hopefully expand to other parts of the state. I think that's definitely something to, from a policy perspective, keep in mind.
So Lauren, you just brought up something that a couple people have asked since we've been on the chat here, which is transportation. There's a big debate right now. The MBTA is talking about some pretty significant cuts to service on buses, the T and the commuter rail. There's sort of people are driving more. Traffic will probably get worse as that happens. There's some concerns about safety on mass transit. How do we manage how does the various transportation challenges we face right now affect the job market and where people work and where companies locate? Or does it, I guess?
Jay may have some direct feedback from his member companies, but I know as companies and as everyone's trying to navigate in COVID these days, thinking about the safety of their employees is paramount. And that means not just how they will be in the workplace, but how they will actually get to work. And so I think there's this navigating in the, more short term and what that will look like versus thinking beyond COVID times. And so I think that's probably at the top of mind for both employees as well as employers.
Yeah, and Lauren, I think you're right about that, and I know that employers are watchful, looking at what the MBTA is proposing. Recognizing many employees in those who are unemployed. I had to balance budgets for 14 years as city manager in my hometown of Chelsea. When you have to balance a budget, you have a $500 million hole. It's tough to balance that budget without affecting some level of service. What's impressed me, Tim, about what the MBTA is doing is that they're being thoughtful about service delivery and are going around and talking to people. I expect what's proposed is not going to be what ends up being adopted, but what we've heard from the MBTA, and the employers are happy to hear this, is that as you begin to bring people back into the office, as you begin to think about it, we want to know about it because we want to be able to manage public transportation needs accordingly. Having said that, it's important that we all see how this all plays out, and we all have some educated opinions as to how it's going to play out. But over the next 2 to 5 years, we're actually going to see how it plays out. And it may be that There needs to be more spend on commuter rail, or maybe that rapid transit is more important, or maybe that bus routes are going to be more in favor than they ever have been, and that we should be creating dedicated bus lanes to move people. And it may be that roadway improvements are necessary because more people are driving in the suburbs, and it makes more sense to do roadways than to try to build trains to the suburban communities. So there's a lot to play out on transportation. I would say that employers are most interested in health and safety of their employees first, in the work-life balance second, and then all those ancillary things third. And how one gets to work is one of those things that it fits into that third category. And if it's public transportation, let's make sure that it's safe and it's convenient and available for you before we expect you to come back into the office.
And I can just comment on sort of pre-COVID, transit was definitely a factor that was usually always considered when we had companies that were looking to relocate. How will this impact, my employees' commute? We need to be within walking distance of the red line. All of those things were very much at the top of the list for consideration. Post-COVID, we're getting a lot more questions about, does the building have parking? Can I get a building with private parking? I'm sure you're all aware that we've seen a lot of parking lots, surface parking in the seaport, or parking garages being converted into other uses. Now, maybe we might not see that as much, but and my final comment on transit is, whatever the service cuts are, whatever the ultimate impact is, I think in the near term, if there's a lower amount of service or a more disruption in the service, it's just one more factor that could impact our ability to get back to whatever we consider to be normal, quote unquote normalcy, because the number of people that were using transit to get to work prior to COVID was, pretty significant.
Yeah, and Tim, one other thing, and it gets Liz reminded me about this. If you think about, we were talking about how many employees are coming into the office on a regular basis. If you go from a 5-day work week to a 4-day work week on average, that's a 20% reduction in the number of people who are coming in. Now, ideally, from a transportation planning perspective, you'd be able to spread that over each of the days. We won't. We know that Friday will probably be the day that the least amount of people come into the office. But it does have some impact on how transportation planners have to think about transportation services. We may never be at the level that we needed public transportation before. Public transportation advocates would argue that we should still be building better public transportation, and I don't disagree with that. But we have a lot to do relative to what the new normal is going to be for people working where, and then match transportation services, including infrastructure improvements at the roadways to that need.
So a couple people asked a very practical question. One person who said they have a child who's graduating college this spring, and I think this is I'm not in this position myself, so I haven't really given it a lot of thought. But how do you go about looking for a job right now? This seems like a really hard time to network. Traditional job fairs are not happening. If I'm graduating from college this spring, or just in the market looking for something new, what should I be doing?
So just knowing how job seekers come to programs like Apprenti, there's a different way of learning about opportunities now, because you don't have that bump effect. But I think also it just really forces people to I hate to say it, but Google, and then you find the opportunity. I actually came across this amazing story on LinkedIn where someone was sharing how they managed to find a great opportunity through the power of LinkedIn and really leveraging the virtual networking nowadays. But I think it goes back to an earlier point that I had for job seekers. There's an awesome network of resources here in Massachusetts for individuals looking for job seekers. The Mass Hire Career Centers are that one-stop shop. There are programs when you do Google, like Apprenti, and all the resources specifically within tech that help to provide that pathway and career path for individuals. But I think really trying to expand your network and think about it in more virtual times these days, because you can still have a coffee with someone. It may just be virtual. And you may be able to realize your second and third degrees of connections through resources like LinkedIn, but then not to forget great resources that we have for any job seeker, like the Mass Hire Career Centers.
And I'll just add on to that. I think industry organizations. So if you're, looking to get into commercial real estate or engineering or architecture, I know I'm a member of Crew Boston. I'm a member of NAOP. All these organizations usually have student memberships that you can get for, fairly inexpensive rate. And they offer, we're at least offering, virtual networking opportunities for students or young members. And there's always something going on in these industry organizations. So if you have a specific area that you want to pursue, I think that's a great route as well.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I'll add that as Lauren was talking about networking, I've been doing an awful lot of 15-minute virtual meetups with people who are connected in my circle or secondary or tertiary from there. And so the networking piece still works. It's going to be done online. And the interesting thing I find, frankly, is that everybody has had to move to some sort of video conference structure. And so now everybody is very comfortable with it. When we first started thinking about it, we had to teach a lot of people how to use Zoom or how to use the other platforms that exist. But now everybody has been using it for so long and has become comfortable with it. I don't know about the rest of you, but I find it strange when I'm just talking on the phone now. I'm so used to seeing the face back and forth that it presents an opportunity for quick discussions with leaders. So, go through your colleges, go through your friends, go through your former employers, and continue to network. And there are opportunities. And then, as Lauren said, Mass Hire or the traditional websites, job boards are still great places to find opportunities. People are hiring out there. I hear it all the time. People are hiring out there.
Another sort of related question for early career workers in particular, and we've touched on this a little bit already, but for early career workers in particular, developing those soft skills and that company culture and those things that you don't learn in college, but that you learn in your first few years on the job about how to be in the working world, right, and how to succeed. It seems like it's really hard to transmit right now, and then therefore it becomes hard to grow your career. Any thoughts on sort of the best ways to make that happen in a remote world?
Well, as part of Apprentice model, there's the technical skills that someone gains as well as the on-the-job training, which is a big part of it. So we've been mindful of this and working with apprentices as well as our employers. And I think what I've seen is companies are investing in new ways of communicating, and it's part of the culture that they already had or the culture that they're building. And I think it's up to employees, people that are joining companies, to spend some time thinking about how you actually communicate, where you may have had to communicate in one way when you were in person, and what that may look like or feel like when you're now doing it over Zoom or Microsoft Teams, Slack, and having that virtual water cooler. And there are some new techniques and new skills and really learning more about yourself that you have to kind of adjust. But I think as companies, find the right ways for their teams to convene, lean into that and to think about that so that you can also strengthen those soft skills. You're not going to be able to hide in your cubicle or in your house, because you have to find creative ways to connect and realize that may require a new muscle that you haven't used before.
Yeah, I also note that social media has many positive benefits. I'm a Twitter guy myself, and I've got all kinds of friends on Twitter that I've been able to develop relationships with that I've never met before. And so it's a change, right? We're all going through a change, but the fundamentals still exist. Who are you as a person? How do you communicate? How do you react to others? Are you empathetic or not? The like. And so find the right channel and utilize that channel. And frankly, I've the contacts that I have on Twitter, I consider some of my best friends people that I haven't met physically, because I've enjoyed so many exchanges of information, so many laughs, so many interesting stories with people. And they're all in, I don't know, what is it, 240 characters or less, so 280 characters or less. That's a good thing.
Yeah, Jay, the first question we got, speaking of your Twitter feed, is where is your frap this morning?
It's pretty funny. Tuscanides in Cambridge, best frap going.
Good. So we got about 5 minutes left. This has been a really great conversation. Thank you guys so much for being part of it. I guess I just wanted to throw it sort of around the horn one more time for sort of any more thoughts you all have on, yeah, where Boston's economy and labor market is going and sort of how people might navigate that as they think about growing their careers over the next year or so.
I'll start. I just think, Boston has grown into a global hub of innovation and tech and life science and healthcare. And despite what's going on currently, that doesn't change. MIT is still here, Harvard is still here, Mass General, Children's, all of those things that make Boston Boston are still here. So I think in the long run, Boston's resilient, and you can sort of see that in the current, I would say, feverish activity in the life science industry. Very, very strong market fundamentals, hiring, all of that kind of stuff. And that may be what brings us out of this current recession. But I think in the long term, Boston is resilient, cities are resilient, and we will continue to be sort of that hub of innovation, on a global scale.
I think, Liz, you just said it so well. I feel like Massachusetts is known to be this hub of innovation, and we've been leading the way with creating life-saving technology right in our backyard. But I think also embracing technological transformations even before 2020. And I think it's really accelerated even more. And so I think there could be a light at the end of the tunnel and some silver lining to all of this, and just really the resilience I think that Massachusetts has, that Boston has, will hopefully set up job seekers for success, employers for success, and create a next chapter for everyone.
And I'm going to try to tap upon a word that I haven't heard a lot during this session. It's entrepreneurship. Gig economy, you're an entrepreneur, and the idea to take a step back and look at what you like to do, what kind of skill you have, and where the world is going, and how do I turn that into a business? I think about bike repairs, for example. I used to joke all the time that I would never want to own a bike shop. That was 20 years ago when it seemed like bikes were going out of fashion. But now bikes are going to be in a more important area, and bike repairs are important. The home IT fix-it guy or gal is an area. There are lots of entrepreneurship programs out there. E4All, for example, is all around the state and offers great advice to entrepreneurs. So, if you have that spirit in you that maybe you want to be your own boss and you're willing to work for multiple people, doing what you really love, there's an opportunity out there. So look for entrepreneurship training programs, and hopefully that'll be the next place where you can make your mark on the economy and support yourself.
Great. Well, that seems like a good place to end this. Thank you guys so much for being part of this, and thanks to our audience of, I saw as many as 130 odd people in here at the peak. I want to say thanks as well to Springfield College for presenting this. And we do a lot of these virtual forums at the Globe these days, so keep an eye on our websites and our social media. There's so much going on in our regional economy right now, and a lot of really interesting stories and interesting people and interesting ideas out there. So we're trying to explore all that. Thank you all so much for joining us, and have a great day and a great next year.